Hey guys, so September is officially over. It's October 2nd as I'm filming this, so I'm gonna do my September wrap up. I only read 11 books in September, which is below my average, with only one DNF. A lot of these I did read as ebooks, so I will pop the pictures up here somewhere. So the first book I read was Ravenfall by Kaylin Josephson, who wrote the Stormcrow duology. I haven't read that, but it's definitely on my TBR after reading this. Ravenfall is a middle grade paranormal mystery. If you're not a fan of horror for the spooky season, then I would highly recommend picking this up. It's got all the atmosphere. You're following 13-year-old Annabelle, who comes from a family where everyone has psychic abilities and powers that they use to run the Ravenfall Inn, which sits on the boundary between the human world and the supernatural world. Except Isabella's power doesn't really help. She has visions of death and dying. Doesn't really help in the day-to-day running of an inn. Until Colin comes to the inn looking for his older brother who has gone missing after his parents are murdered. And the two go on this adventure with all these shenanigans to try and figure out what happens to his family. And it's just fun, imaginative, and surprisingly heartwarming in moments. And one particular scene, and if you've read it, you know the one I'm talking about, basically reduced me to tears. So, yeah. The second book I read, and the one I DNF'd this month, was My Heart is a Chainsaw by Stephen Graham Jones. Now, I was super hyped for this because I'd heard nothing but good things about it. It focused on the slasher genre. And I was like, yeah, like, I'm a horror fan. I've watched every slasher movie there is. So when I was introduced to Jade, the main protagonist, who was, like me, a major fan of horror films, basically a walking encyclopedia on horror movies and horror cinema, I was like, yeah, this is a protagonist I can really get along with, But then nothing really happened. Like, I got, I think, about 35% of the way in, and I was bored. Like, so bored. There was nothing happening, and the stuff that was happening off screen. Jade really didn't have anything to do with it, and I just couldn't push myself through it. I might give it another try. I don't know, not this month anyway, maybe next year. Because I know there's a sequel coming out, so I might push myself through the first one if the reviews about the second one are positive, but just didn't work for me, and I was really disappointed by this. Then I read another homage to the horror genre in It Looks Like Us by Alison Ames. Now, this entire book is basically a homage to The Thing, which was one of the movies I watched back in the day, and it terrified me for a long time. But yeah, it essentially follows the same premise as The Thing, where a group of teenagers, in this case, go to Antarctica as student volunteers. on an environmental project, and very quickly things go to hell. The protagonists were amazing. Riley, in particular, suffers really badly with anxiety, and she's also on the ACE spectrum. And then there's other characters that, I don't want to spoil too much, but like the other characters are really good. And the actual horror elements aren't so much gory, but the image they conjure in your mind is terrifying. Then I ended up switching back to something a lot more wholesome, with Raising the Horseman by Serena Valentino. Now, Valentino is known for doing reimaginings, retellings of classic Disney stories, and this is a retelling of The Headless Horseman. And it just wasn't what I was expecting. Like, initially I was like, oh, it's just going to be another retelling, it's the same story. But it had a few little twists in there, and it ends up being a female romance, which was very nice to see. And I ended up really enjoying that. Oh shit, I don't think I've given ratings to these. I gave Ravenfall 5 stars, DNF'd My Heart is a Chainsaw. It Looks Like Us was a 4.5. Raising the Horseman was a 3.75. And then my next read, which rounded off a series, the original part of the series that I really wanted to finish this year, which was Children of Dune by Frank Herbert. So I've read Dune, the first 2 Dune books, and I really liked them. But I took a bit of a break before jumping into Children of Dune, because I know it capped off the original trilogy, and then the next 3 books skip forward a lot in time. And then the rest of the books explore the wider Dune universe. Obviously, if you haven't read Dune, especially with the movie being released not so long ago, I would highly recommend it, especially if you're a fan of political intrigue, schemes and plotting, desolate worlds. It's amazing. Obviously, in this book, we're following Paul's children, Leto the second, even though he's technically the third, and Ganima. And it just builds on the plot lines that have been expanded upon in the first 2 books, and it brings them to a really nice conclusion. That was a solid 5-star read for me. I think every book in the Dune series has been a 5-star or very close to a 5-star, and I'd highly recommend you pick it up. I also capped off another series after that, which was The Inheritance Game. I read The Final Gambit by Jennifer Lynn Barnes in September, and holy hell, this was amazing. The closest thing I can kind of link it to is kind of like A Good Girl's Guide to Murder, but it doesn't get as dark. Like A Good Girl's Guide to Murder gets really dark towards the end. This doesn't. This maintains a kind of hopeful atmosphere, and it's really light and funny in places. Obviously, you're following Avery, who's inherited billions from Tobias Hawthorne, and she doesn't know why. And the whole series is then figuring out why Tobias Hawthorne named her as heir rather than one of his 4 grandsons or one of his children. And it caps off really nicely. Like, the relationship between Avery and Grayson, I really liked. And the relationship between Avery and Jameson. Although she does end up with Jameson, they are endgame, and you know that from pretty early on in the first book. But I would have liked to see her relationship with Grayson explored a little more, and her friendship with Nash through Libby, because they were hella funny when they were there together. Another 5-star read. Like, highly recommend that series. Then I read something that wasn't my usual thing. I read a horror graphic novel, The Last Book You'll Ever Read by Cullen Bunn. Now, graphic novels I have a love-hate relationship with. Like, I am a die-hard manga reader, so I really like my visual media to say as much as it can with its artwork rather than with its dialogue and exposition and text. Because when you're putting, for me personally, if you're putting a lot of text in a graphic novel, a lot of dialogue, you may as well just have written a book and added some cool pictures to it. So I've never really enjoyed graphic novels. But I did like this one because it was really gory, it was really adult, and it kind of just appealed to the horror fan in me. So you're following Olivia Cade, who wrote a book called Satyr. And this book has caused insane amounts of violence and bloodshed all over the world. And she's going on a book tour, so she has security. And it's about all the crazy things that happened during this book tour. And yeah, it got really, really dark in places, but still wasn't really my thing. I think I gave it a 4 stars. Next was The Killing Code by Ellie Marney. This was another one that I got an arc of for a blog tour. And it's another genre that I don't particularly mesh well with, and that's historical fiction. Historical fiction is a major hit or miss for me. Even with the same author, like take Kerri Maniscalco, Stalking Jack the Ripper, even though I've only read the first 2 books. Really enjoyed them. I've read 2 of the 3 books in the Kingdom of the Wicked series. Didn't really like them. Both historical fiction with fantasy elements. More so in Kingdom of the Wicked than in Stalking Jack the Ripper. But yeah, historical fiction has never really been a genre that I get on well with. The Killing Code, however, was interesting. It was pitched as a historical fiction, a World War II historical fiction, with a serial killer. So I was like, oh, interesting. We're following Kit, who's a female code breaker. And then a bunch of murders start happening, and she and a group of others got to figure out who the hell is killing all these people, and why. I will say the first half was really slow to get going, and we do get the first murder, but after that it kind of slows down, doesn't really go anywhere, until it picks up around the halfway mark. But it was okay. It was a 3.5. And then this month there seems to be a trend of me picking up books for genres that I normally don't read a lot of. The next one is one I barely read anything from, and that's contemporary fiction, especially YA contemporary fiction. So The Epic Story of Every Living Thing by Deb Caletti. Didn't say something like I requested the arc without knowing much about it. Got on the blog tour. When I actually read the synopsis, I was like, oh god, I don't think I'm gonna like this, because you're following Harper Prue, who is a sperm donor baby, and she wants to figure out who her father is, because she feels like she's got this hole in her life where her father should be. And she goes on a voyage, basically meeting siblings, uncovering secrets, dealing with her own anxiety and her need to present this perfect version of herself to the world. It has a lot of themes that I think young people, especially today, will appreciate. And I ended up actually really enjoying it for a contemporary fiction. I gave it 3.75 stars. I would have liked more time with her dad. he doesn't really appear for the first time until the halfway mark, and then everything seems a bit packed in the second half. So I would have liked her to have met him a bit earlier in the book and really expanded on the development of their relationship, her relationship with his siblings, her father's relationship with his children. But yeah, I do highly recommend that, especially if you're looking for a good cry. Then things kind of went downhill again. I got an arc of Lord of the Flyfest by Goldie Moldavsky. Now, I have heard amazing things about her books over the years, from Kill the Boy Bands to No Good Deed. I've heard great things about them, and the Mary Shelley Club as well. So when I got on this one, and it was kind of pitched as like Lost meets Lord of the Flies with a lot of social commentary, I was like, okay, I can kind of get behind this. But from the beginning, it didn't really know what it wanted to be. It was like, was it a survival novel? No, not really. Was it a thriller mystery? No, not really. Was it a horror? Definitely not. Was it a comedy? It tried to be, but was it funny? No. So it felt really lost. We're following Rafi, who's going to a music festival called Flyfest, because an artist named River Stone is the headliner, and she wants to interview him for a podcast, believing that he murdered his ex-girlfriend. And then everything gets really weird, really strange, like it kind of does in Lord of the Flies, but in Lord of the Flies there's a really heavy survival element. You know, if they don't do certain things, they are going to die. You never get those kind of stakes in this book, and it's just weird. Could be that I just didn't vibe with the kind of genres and commentary that the author wanted to make this book, so I will give the Mary Shelley Club a chance. But yeah, I'm a bit concerned that I'm not going to vibe with this author, and it only got 3.25 stars from me. But then I did cap the month off with a really good read, and that was Skin of the Sea by Natasha Boyne. I do have a copy of Soul of the Deep, which I will be reading in October. But essentially we're following Simidele, who is a Mamuata, or a mermaid charged with collecting the souls of those that die at sea. Until one day she saves a boy, Adekola, who is thrown off a slave ship, and he's still alive, so she rescues him. But in doing so, she breaks a decree of the Supreme Creator, and then they have to go on this really intense journey to save everyone, basically. And it was really great. You learn a lot about West African history, West African religion and culture, in a way that you don't have to know anything about it beforehand. It's explained really well without being info dumpy. The characters' relationships and the journeys that go on are amazing. And even though this kind of YA fantasy typically isn't something I've enjoyed as I've got older, I really like this, and I can't wait to get into the sequel, even though I'm not sure where the sequel's going to go, because this kind of rounded off really nicely for me, and that was a solid 4.5 stars for me. The only reason it wasn't a 5 stars was I had some issues with particular characters and the pacing in places. But apart from that, I think I had a really great reading month. And I'll see you again for my October TBR.